the past, I think convolution was like accepted and right, everything was segmented and everybody had their own team and they would just hand off with like an email and not really have great accountability for those processes. So like I think efficiency in a nutshell is the word for why lead to cash has come around.
All right, everybody, welcome to this episode of the RevAmp podcast. Super excited to have today's guest. We have Mitchel, who is the Director of Revenue Operations at TapClicks, and we're going to talk all about stuff around lead to cash and all sorts of other interesting topics. But before we dive into that, why don't you, tell us a little bit about your background and, how you got to where you're at today and some of your experiences along the way.
Yeah, absolutely. And thanks for having me, Mark. Happy to be on here. Lead to cash is very encompassing and convoluted. So I feel like that could mean a lot of things. So putting some clarity on that for people is always a great discussion, in my opinion. Yeah, happy to give a little background. I actually started in ad tech and operative at around 2012. I worked in architecture for many years before that and made a switch, went into ad tech, worked up doing a lot of different ad operations, learning different, revenue streams for the different verticals and advertising, also very convoluted. When you think about the ecosystem, I think starting with that background really gives you an advantage because there's just so many companies. It's hard for everybody to stay up to date. So I think that experience was really helpful. From there, I actually got recruited with a friend, Christopher Prinos, who worked at Media Spectrum and got my first sort of taste of an OMS and learning about the lead to cash for the first time. You're doing massive discoveries, learning about sales staging processes, going into the order management systems and OMSs and how you're feeding out to do the reconciliation and automated billing. So to me, that's sort of the trifecta, which we're definitely going to get into: CRM, OMS, ERP, customer relationship management, order management system, enterprise resource planning, right? So how you're doing the billing, APAR, GL, all of that. So from there, I actually went into programmatic a little while, and then Chris recruited me back at Indigo Trigger, and I did consulting for a number of years for lead to cash. And then about 3 years ago, I joined TapClicks, coming in to sort of help fill some of that knowledge and help out some of our enterprise clients, as well as take on some of that internally, as it is, really coming to light as something that helps make companies successful in today's age. So
yeah, no, it's awesome. I really appreciate it. And it's interesting, now that I think about it, the transition from architecture, like actual architecture, to something like what you're doing is, which is kind of similar, right? It's like building the architecture. Did that, it's kind of outside the scope, but how did that happen? Was there something about having been in architecture that helps you in your current role?
Yeah, and I'll take to sort of two-part there. I'm a candid person, so I'm definitely going to be transparent today. It started actually, I had worked in Georgia and I moved to New York City at the very beginning, January 2012. It was during a recession and all firms had hiring pauses. So I had a second cousin at Operative, and I got an interview, and I started 2 days later because New York, the nest egg I had went away in about 3 weeks. So I needed to be able to pay rent and everything. It turns out it was a switch that was very comparable. I think I did a ton of CAD work, right? Computer animated design. So any of those programs, I was very specialized in doing the admin backend, learning all the different specs for it because it has a lot of similarities in the sense of just learning a system inside out.
Yeah.
So I think it did help with that aspect because I'm naturally curious and I want to know how things work. So the architecture side of it, I think, translated in that capacity,
Yeah.
not in like actual real world experience. I don't think it's the client relationship for sure. And, being personable and stuff that helped. But the other side of it is just the admin work that you do, because architecture, you spend a lot of time at a computer, especially in school in those earlier years before you get more senior and you can crumple up pieces of paper and say, make this building. But now that's how I would say it translates. But looking back, I'm glad I made the switch. There's just so much curiosity to me out there, and this is really a massive business thing that I feel like I've sort of fallen into. So
awesome. I love that context. So yeah, kind of talking a little bit about the lead to cash trifecta that we're going to talk about. I guess for the folks at home to kind of set the stage here, many people are probably familiar with both concepts, but maybe you can talk a little bit about, when you say lead to cash, I think the more well-known quote to cash, what are the differences there? They might seem kind of obvious, but maybe it'll help to kind of set the groundwork here.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, it's a great discussion item. Lead to cash is like all encompassing, like in your entire business organization and operations, right? You're thinking lead, you're thinking first touch points, attribution. Did I send an emailer that they saw? Was there a branding campaign or they never clicked it? What was my first touch point? So you're looking back at these different attribution windows, figuring out how to do your lead source allocation and attribution. And then you're working through the staging. So, once it converts to an opportunity, how do the sales reps work through their different CRM? I'm just going to use Salesforce for the sample of this discussion because that's the most common one I've used. Having said that, right, HubSpot, there's a ton of Pipedrive, ton of other solutions for especially S&B businesses. But from there, you get all your staging set up and you're doing a ton of different just dimensions and metric reporting and analytics. So you're looking at how many of my opportunities are closing from this stage forward? So you work through getting like a weighted pipeline essentially. So what's coming down and what you expect to close in Q2, Q3, Q4. So that's sort of the front end of lead to cash, right? And this is where I'm talking about, I sort of call it, holy trinity, trifecta, whatever it is with the CRM. So when we say lead to cash, the CRM piece is really the lead to quote. Right. And that's the front end of it, is going through all of your different staging, opportunity staging, finding out how you're going to contract, do the quoting, make sure you go through any mods, you're getting signature. And then once it goes to closed one, right? And some people have email confirmations, depending on the scale. Most people have some sort of e-sign tool, via Salesforce or another CPQ like DealHub. So we have those different windows for our clients to actually come in. It does all the auto populating from the quote. It allows for you to track different iterations and versions. And for us, that was really the key steps to being able to automate a lot of our financial reports, because now we can segment for, we call it NLE, new logo or expansion revenue. So from there, right, everything's feeding back in. We can actually segment our data properly with these different contract dimensions. That's all automated. It feeds right back into Salesforce. Now we have a ton of Salesforce reports. We actually feed into our own system. And in our TapClicks dashboards, we're now visualizing, doing pipelines, future sort of forecasting, and using it for that full capacity of looking at like really breakdowns across product lines, because it's all the way down to the line item level, right? Product or line item feeds through as well. So we can really get some out-of-box reporting. So that's when you get lead to quote. Now, quote to cash is really the next step, where you actually, that's when all the other work happens. I don't want to take anything away from sales. There's certainly, some talent that it takes there. I'm not super client facing on that sales side. I prefer to solution and help. So once they get the deal done, they hand it off for fulfillment. And that's the order management system side of things. So there's a lot of OMSs out there. TapClicks, we have our own Tap Orders and Tap Workflows for that. A ton of different systems in the realm. But when you compare, you're really talking about the PIOs, the operatives, the media spectrums, motions, stuff like that, depending on if you're supplier demand side. And from that's when you have all your workflows. Okay, I'm going to trigger off my email team to go build out this emailer. I'm making a website for them, and I'm going to do SEO. I'm going to do ad searches. I'm going to do programmatic through, Choosel or Compulse or Trade Desk or AdCellerant or any, Simplify, right? There's millions of these options, but you have to fulfill it specifically. So you're getting creative. You're going through QA. You're doing every step. Once you get through that, and you actually, every line item, right, has its own fulfillment process. So it's all got to get forward. And then once you have that fulfillment done in the OMS, it feeds through typically to a billing system. Sometimes all of those are combined, or several companies do all three of them together. Salesforce, NetSuite, others all have that capability where you can really get all in one. But it feeds through, and most of this in ad tech, you have to do reconciliation, which means you're having to wait for the end of the month. You're getting the actuals back. You probably have a 3-day data settling policy. You might even have a grace period. You have to put in your billing rules where, we missed it by 50,000. We get 2 days to give those 50,000 impressions, and we're going to bill you for the whole month. So there's all these rules on reconciliation, partner to partner. And I'll call it O&O, owned and operated inventory, is very unique from all the publisher side of things. So once you get that in, then you actually send out an invoice, right? And that's the back end of the quote to cash. That's when you're actually sending it out and you have AR, you need to get paid out. And that's what the ERPs, the enterprise resource planning tools do, where they help you do the reconciliation, automatically set up billing schedules to do the invoicing with those numbers. You're getting it back, so it'll feed into all of your general ledger, right? There's our money. This is what we should have. We have a deferred payment, whatever, all of that is tracked in the ERP. Typically commissions, payouts, stuff like that are tracked there because you can have better RBAC and permissioning. But that's
great.
right. The gap there is really lead to quote, and the separation is CRM.
Yeah.
Where quote to cash is you're already past the CRM.
And it sounds like, in your world, there's a ton of variation, which I guess makes, your specialization pretty unique, because you really have to have a wide scope of experience and understanding. When we had spoken earlier, I think you'd mentioned that you were kind of in this lead to cash world for quite a while, something, close to 10 years or something like that. A lot of things have changed, right? For everybody across everything, but in particular in kind of your world around that, how have you seen kind of the evolution and transformations? How have they impacted the challenges or the opportunities that are available?
I think the biggest changes are, in the past, I think convolution was like accepted, and right, everything was segmented and everybody had their own team, and they would just hand off with like an email and not really have great accountability for those processes. So like, I think efficiency in a nutshell is the word for why lead to cash has come around. The margins are shrinking, transparency is really popular. So you need to, get the most bang for your buck as you can, which means you need to be very efficient with your system architecture. So data should flow. You should have tracking automatically. You should be able to pull a report right now and look at, year over year growth or comparisons. And, this person has completed this many tasks and it's averaging them, 6 minutes to do something that somebody else can do in 3, right? So that sort of convoluted previous workflows was very accepted. Even 10 years ago, I would think is really when this is starting to kick off, was when I was coming into the industry. But even then, right, you were using different like Salesforce tables. You weren't having things that really feed through straight to, Google Ads. Oh, my campaign's going to run. I need to do a creative swap here. Let me put it in this OMS. It's going to push out to 10 different systems, right? That was all just swivel chair approaches in the past, where you have somebody just constantly having to go in there and make these manual updates, manual tracking. Oh, I forgot, I didn't see this email, things slipped through the cracks. So you have a ton of leakage and missed revenue because of these inefficiencies. So I really think it comes down to money is really why it's come back. And I think the biggest changes I've seen is, one, just technology's ability, right? Where now we have all these integrations and you just open an API endpoint and it's like, here, I'm going to ping that, or, here, I'm going to send this to you and you consume it, or vice versa. Doing the different unique identifiers to join all that data, and everything has just become really more clear to people. But I really do think it comes down to cost efficiency. And if you're not efficient, you just have missed revenue, right? It's leakage. Like, call it what you want, but if you're having to manually do the same thing in 4 or 5 systems, then there's some inefficiency there that you can capitalize and monetize, quite frankly. So that's why it's come in.
Yeah, for sure. And I think especially today that efficiency is more important because, budgets are being gone through with a fine-tooth comb, and finance is now even involved in more and more stuff, exactly because we've seen we were in a period of time where interest rates were essentially zero and budgets were fat, and the bazooka on the economy was going, and then we kind of pulled back, and there was a lot of choppiness there for a bit. It seems to hopefully have kind of mellowed out, but we're still at a point where there was always this idea for many years of growth at all costs. It didn't matter how much it costs to acquire a customer. Let's just do it. That's the only thing people care about. Out the window, right? It's about the efficiency. People are looking at numbers like net revenue retention rather than just the net new acquisition. And those are all, I think, themes that are kind of impacting this world. But there's a few different strands I'd love to pull there. One is, there's been, especially over the last decade, the amount of integrations, like you said, and automation and ability to connect the dots has increased, right? Mm-hmm. There's like the no code native integrations, and then there's like the other stuff. In today's day and age, as someone in a revenue operations role, is there a requirement, and has it increased to be more low code or code than just completely no code? Like the ability to kind of connect APIs yourself without having to work with a dev team or build some sort of internal tool. Is that something that has become more necessary?
Yeah, and right, translation files and just using like a Postman or something like that to do your payload building and testing and pushing to an API endpoint, like super common, I would say, especially in RevOps, because you are joining data from so many different systems. So I need to make a query from NetSuite and join it with, a ton of other native ones for the actuals to do reconciliation, stuff like that. I think it is getting more standardized. I know we have our own model when we're setting up some integrations that essentially you can build out that translation file in screen, right, in the UI, the user interface. So it helps it helps with the user experience UX when you have something clean like that. And it helps enable people that may not be as technical, because you don't really need to know like how to build a payload and like set that up to be in RevOps, in my opinion. Like that may even be too much, right? That's just sort of my background, but at the same time, I don't think it's going to be required in the near future because of those native integrations. You have these other, middleware softwares that essentially do all of that for you, the Jitterbits of the world out there like that. And I think it's going away. So I think the technical skill on like the integration level at some point shouldn't be required, because ease of use for really just user experience is getting better now.
Yeah.
Even in the past like 2 or 3 years, I can see it simplifying. You used to really have to go in, do some sort of OAuth via Postman, set up a translation file, do it all in there, and that's very time consuming. So automating that is just more efficiency, and I don't see us having to be that technical in the near future, to be honest.
Yeah. So I want to talk a little bit about kind of the push and pull of, let's say, complexity, as well as the need for being, flexibility, right? And how those two things kind of compete against each other sometimes, right? So there's often this idea that the more complex the use case, the less kind of flexible or end user friendly whatever solution you implement has to be. I hopefully that is a conception that people are learning is a false conception. But that balance, is that something that you deal with, and how do you deal with it?
Yeah. Definitely another great question. And I think, again, this actually really should be done with like cost analysis, in my opinion. And depending, right, SMB, you're going to do some things manually. You're going to be in G Suite or Excel. You're not going to want to pay for a more complex ERP because you don't have to yet, right? One person can handle something. When you start to really become more scalable and you need to scale in that capacity, that's when I think the cost analysis is really clear, right? I have one person. Okay, now I need two people to automatically make all these invoices and the sales orders and make sure it adds everything manually. And I'm going into my provisioning system manually. I'm not automating that from whatever order management system it is. So everything's just swivel chaired around. At some point, it's a pretty clear comparison. Oh, this is how many hours, this is how much per hour I pay. This is how much the system costs. And if you should really be doing that sort of, right, it's an X to Y sort of ratio type of thing. It's sort of simple cost analysis, I think, because you should always be doing your research, knowing best practices, finding out cost. And when you know that cost and when surpass that threshold, it's time to make the change. And it, I sometimes I know you talk about efficiency, and unfortunately, some of that does relate to people's livelihoods, and so it is a tough discussion, to be honest. Definitely one with leadership, especially, I'm very personable, so I always want to protect my team's jobs and anything like that, and fight for them to get raises and everything, and that's how a manager should work, for sure. But this is when you're thinking, oh, I've got 10 people, but I really only need two. And that's efficiency. Helping people and helping them understand and learn the next steps where they can be part of the next step is where you really need to do that and keep moving forward with that employee management and helping them learn more. And, the AI stuff is super coming in now where
Yeah.
it's going to replace some stuff, but you're still going to have to do the prompt builder. You're still going to have to constantly optimize that and actually, do some QA quality assurance on that information. So I'll pause, but it is a difficult thing for efficiency and cost analysis, but that's how you'll really successfully become scalable in my mind.
Yeah. And that you bring up the AI piece, right? And I think there is a lot of fear, right? I think
Yeah.
you can look at the extremes. There are people who are like, this is Terminator, this is the Matrix, we're all going to be useless, it's going to take all of our jobs. There are people who think, that's just complete nonsense. And then I think I have come to a happy medium where I'm pretty sure that AI creates a huge amount of efficiency and probably has enabled a single person to do multiple people's jobs, and therefore has probably been some of the reason that there's been headcount, cuts
Yeah.
in our space. But yeah, I mean, from your perspective, are you using any AI in your kind of lead to cash workflow at the moment? And B, to somebody who's getting started in a RevOps role or maybe kind of working across the lead to cash, flow there, what can you tell them in terms of what they could do to maybe, ensure that they're able to leverage some of these new tools to make themselves more valuable?
Yeah, absolutely. And I'll say, like in the day-to-day sort of world, if you're not using AI in in my world, I think there's a problem because it's pretty cheap. And and this is, I'll tell you where it's the most time savings for me. It's really reading through knowledge bases. I used to spend, hours and hours a week trying to find the right, trailhead thing for a Salesforce form, or going through and trying to just find any sort of specifics about a vendor knowledge base and just that different information. It's super helpful in that capacity. It automatically reads through them, quickly gives you that information and like step one, step two, step three. The other side is formulas. I used to, have to workshop if then super complex, they're this big on your Salesforce screen, looking at different dimensions and segmenting and then doing different if-then statements based on those different even role levels or anything. If you get it started, like it's just so good at helping you resolve errors and stuff like that. Super, super recommend people doing that because it'll give you some time back on just scraping the internet. And it just gives you better responses that are succinct and clear on what you should do for actionable items. Um, The other side of it is, using it properly and figuring out where to use it and when to use it. There's a lot of tools in the marketplace, a lot of different competitors going into it. I mean, even anybody, right? You're using Google, there's a little pop-up now. You're working with basically everybody is going into AI in some capacity. And, TapClicks, we have, billions and billions of dollars worth of data. So like, for us, we're going to start, and we are doing it now, to look at like auto optimization, right? We have so much data that people can use for their own instances and look at it and be like, oh, I'm getting a better response in this vertical or with this behavioral targeting or in this geo, right? And start to automatically funnel it so you get your best ROI, return on investment for, your whatever optimization goal you're using, number of impressions, your cost per lead, cost per click, whatever it is. Cost per acquisition, CPAs as well would be a huge one for that, especially for e-com, which is really blowing up and stuff like this. So the AI side of things is, I will say, I think it's starting to plateau in the sense that like we've really, right, the bubble burst, everybody needed to be on top of it. Everybody needed to be a part of it or have a partner that does it for them. I think, trying not to drink the ocean would be a phrase that comes to mind with this. And, make sure that my other favorite phrase is measure twice, cut once. So make sure you're using it right. Make sure you're not trying to make rash, quick decisions, in my opinion, because AI is limited right now, no matter what anyone says. I think machine learning, ML AI is like really, really here right now. And I think it helps people be more efficient in their day-to-day and get time back in a lot of it. But be a little wary. Don't replace full teams for sure. Yeah, there's a lot of stuff it can't do, and there's a lot of stuff we should be a little hesitant to use it for, in my opinion.
Yeah.
But I think it's going to be part of, especially analytics and insights. That's what we're able to do now is, pulling through and writing a very clear, succinct prompt for it to give you, top 5 reasons and what has happened week over week or month over month for this campaign. Clicks went up by 1%. That's attributed to, you adding this other geo or this other demographic targeting dimension is helping yours, right? And then making recommendations from that. So taking the analytics and then being able to use it for insights for your future optimization and campaign work.
Yeah, awesome. Yeah, and like I also have, when there was a phase where I, like everybody else, kind of may have, imbued to the AI more power than it actually has. But I think anyone who uses these tools often enough realizes that there's something missing. I can't really articulate it, but it's not going to become sentient tomorrow morning. There is a piece missing there where you often come up against its limits and realize, oh, this is a machine. This is not a sentient being. And it's wrong oftentimes, right? I mean, it's just
yeah. Sometimes you read a response and you're like, what are you talking about? This is definitely wrong.
Yeah.
So totally aligned with that.
Yeah. And I think, for me, and kind of similar to what I brought up earlier, one of the things that have been huge, because I'm not a background in technology, tech stuff, development, anything like that, but having AI able to walk me through, hey, how do I make this, connect this API to this API, that kind of thing, has saved me amazing amount of time that I, instead of having to pull in a dev person or write a ticket, able to kind of do those things on my own. And I think I often tell other people, like, it is democratizing a lot of this stuff that was way out of reach for kind of regular humans. But we're coming to the end here. So before we close, for somebody who's maybe just kind of earlier on in their RevOps career, you've been in this space for quite a while. What's a good takeaway for someone to, things they can learn, or maybe kind of one strategy they can implement that'll help them both survive and move up, thrive?
RevOps may be actually more focused than what I'm necessarily talking about in full lead to cash, right? Because that's system architecture, ecosystem discussion. I mean, what I would give the advice for is just keep learning as much as you can. I'm constantly reading articles, trying to listen to podcasts about stuff like this. Perfect example of is your podcast. Um, but keep educating yourself. If you get behind, it's really hard to catch up. So work with your companies. Most companies today are able to be like, oh, there's a Tuesday afternoon RevOps course that you can take weekly. We'll pay for it. Take advantage of those opportunities from your companies. I would highly, highly recommend if you have some sort of paid program with your company to take advantage of that and really get like a certification. Keep getting certified, keep adding it on to your resume, to your sort of knowledge, skills, and that would be the number one. Two is reach out to people. Talk to someone. If you know somebody more senior, I certainly have a couple of my own mentors in the realm. I'm fortunate to have an uncle that's pretty senior in business that helps. And then I mentioned Chris Prinos, who honestly, has taught me a lot about the whiteboarding. Like he taught me everything about lead to cash, to be honest. But like, you find somebody that cares, that wants to work with you, get some mentors, somebody that can help you, somebody you can ask questions to. And I'm fortunate to have those. But that would be the two things. Find somebody to work with and keep educating yourself.
Awesome. And in the last minute or two here before we close things up, is there anywhere people can go to learn more about you or about TapClicks and kind of the interesting stuff you're doing that,
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, my marketing team is probably listening to this and like,
I had them in mind.
Yeah. No, I mean, tapclicks.com, please, tapclicks.com. We have a lot of different revenue streams. We're really opening up a lot of different stuff with AI, which for us, because we have so much data, it's very helpful. So tapclicks.com, we have, we're on all social channels, just search TapClicks. And I'm feel free to reach out. I'm always happy to connect on LinkedIn. Any questions, comments, concerns, anything at all, I'd always be happy to discuss with people. So
we'll put both the link to TapClicks as well as your LinkedIn on the show notes. Mitchell, thank you so much for taking the time to chat with me today. Really appreciate it. And hopefully we'll get to do a round two sometime soon in the future.
yeah.